Were Icelandic and English the same language? Well, in the 3rd century AD, the Proto-West Germanic language split from the North Germanic language. From the Proto-West Germanic language like Dutch, German, and English came about. From the North branch, the North Germanic languages such as Swedish, Danish, Norwegian, and Icelandic came about roughly 1,700 years ago. But keep in mind what a semantic evolution is. This means when one word, even though being the same word, starts getting a different usage in different lands. And despite being the same word, throughout the years starts getting a new meaning. And this is something that mostly in English happened. Icelandic retains many traits from the Proto-Germanic language that English has already modified, but also English keeps a few of them that Icelandic didn't. So in 20 rules, you will be able to recognize more than half of the Icelandic words. Let's see the rule number 1. Words in English having an O. In Proto-Germanic, they used to be I, and we'll find them in Icelandic as A. Let's read a few examples. Bone, we'll find it as bane. Stone, stain. Home, heim. No, nay. Cloth, klæða. Klæða was a loan word from a West Germanic language that came from northern Germany. Alone, ein. Well, Icelandic didn't keep the al part, but it has the own part, and we can find it as ein. One is also ein. Two, tveir. Do, they. Token, taken. Hat, heitur. Rule number 2. In Proto-Germanic, some words started with an H. In the Old English language, this H could be found, but in modern English, it completely disappeared. Icelandic, though, retains this H, so we can see the similarities adding the H to this rule. Laughter, hlátur, laugh, hlæja. Líf, hlaupa, listen, hlusta. Loud, hljóð, lot, hlutur. Raven, hrafn, ring, hringur. To ring, hringja. Rather, hraður. Bridge, hryggur. As you can see, most of these words have retained the original meaning, but some of them have changed. For instance, so ridge is actually the spine of the mountains. But in this case, hryggur is the spine of a person or the back of a person. Rather comes from hrað, which used to mean soon in Proto-Germanic. So when you want something sooner, it's because you rather that. You want it sooner, you want it faster. And in Icelandic, it means fast. Hlutas, or hláuds, in Gothic language, it meant your inheritance. And usually it was always portions of land. So in English, lot retains a sense of that inheritance that was a piece of land, therefore that's a lot. And pieces of lands are usually big. That's why it started meaning a lot. And in Icelandic, hlutur, it actually means something completely different now. Hlutur means a thing, but also retains the meaning of your share or even a part, which comes from the idea of the inheritance that was meant for you. Rule number 3, words in English starting with WH. They used to be in Old English HW and have an H at the beginning. For instance, the word what, maybe you have heard some people that pronounce it like what, but nowadays this sounds very archaic. In Icelandic, they still retain the H at the beginning of this word, so let's compare them. What, hvað. Who, hver. When, hvenær. Where, hvar. Whale, hvalur. Wheel, hvelhjól. White, hvítur. Weed, hveiti. While, kvilla, with a different meaning. Whisper, hviskra. So in Proto-Germanic, there were 2 ways of saying whispering. Whisprona or whiskrona. So English kept the whisprona version that gave us whisper, and Icelandic kept the whiskrona version that gave us hviskra. Rule number 4, English transformed the G's from Proto-Germanic into I's. So let's compare them. Fair in the sense of beautiful, not the opposite of unfair. In Icelandic, we'll find it as fagur. Rain, regen. Nail, lögur. Way, vegur. Day, dagur. Lay, leggja. May, mega. Say, segja or saga. Eye, auga. Rule number 5, words starting in English with W. In some cases, the W completely disappears in the language of the Vikings, therefore in Icelandic as well. For instance, Wednesday comes from Wodanas, which was the god of rage. In Old Norse, it became Odin, and in Icelandic is Odin. Wish comes from Wunskjan. In Icelandic, we'll find it as Óska. Wolf comes from Wolfas. In Icelandic, we'll find it as Ulfur. Wrong comes from Vrangas. In Icelandic, we'll find it as ranked. Wrath or wrath in Old English comes from ræðas. In Icelandic, will become reiður. Word comes from urðá. In Icelandic, we'll find it as orð. Worm comes from urmis, that gave us in Icelandic urmur. And wool comes from wúló, that gave us ull. Double L in Icelandic is pronounced like a this is like a click under the tongue, very similar to the Nahuatl language in Mexico. Rule number 6. Words in English that have u, au, u, a, I, and e. This is the result of the great vowel shift that happened hundreds of years ago in England. Originally, they were all au and u in Proto-Germanic, and we'll find it as such in Icelandic, with a slight difference in pronunciation, with au being pronounced as öy. So let's read a few examples. Room comes from room. In Icelandic, we'll find it as room, but meaning bed, house. Hús, mouse, moose, out, ut, sour, sur, brown, brunn, up, blue, blá, eye, auga, reð, rauður, líf, hlaupa, cheap, kaupa, dream, draumur, leaf, lauf, east, austur. Rule number 7. Words in English having a GH. This GH has become mostly silent. In some cases, it's still pronounced as an F, but originally it was pronounced like a H. In Scotland, we can still find some regions where people still pronounce this GH as H. So let's read a few examples. Night, nótt, 8, átta, right, réttur, slaughter, sláttur, slight, sléttur, mighty, máttugur, daughter, dóttir, light, léttur. Keep in mind that the meanings are not 100% accurate. Some of these words have gone through some changes. This is just an easier way to memorize them and understand where words come from. Rule number 8. Words in English having O, and O. In Proto-Germanic, there used to be a G. So Icelandic retains this G. Draw, which can also be found in English as drag. In Icelandic, we'll find it as draga. Maw, this is the name for the stomach of an animal. In Icelandic, it's a stomach in general. Magi, saw, as the tool. Sa, rainbow. Regnbogi, tomorrow. The morrow part comes from morgan, and in Icelandic, we'll find it as morgun. Sorrow, sorg, follow. Fylgja, fowl. Fugl, low. Laugur, owl. Ugla. Rule number 9. Words ending in English in T or the. In Icelandic, we'll find it as th. For instance, at. In Icelandic will be ath. That, það, tithe, teeth. Word, orth. Opened, opnath. Rule number 10. Words in English starting with CH, there used to be a K before, and Icelandic retains that. For instance, cheap, kaupa, meaning buying. Church, kirkja. Chest, as in a trunk. Kista, meaning box. Choose, kjósa, meaning voting. Churl or Charles, sharing the same etymology. Karilas in Proto-Germanic, Karl, meaning a man, also a personal name. Reach, rikkur. Rule number 11. Words starting with W in English will be found in Icelandic as a V. For instance, want, vanta, meaning lacking. Water, vatn, weather, veður. Wild, filter. Win, vinna, also meaning working. Weapon, vopn. Worth, verð. Web, vefur. Wagon, vagn. Way, vega. Work, verk. Well, vel. Wise, vis. Wheel, vil. Weave, vefja. With, vith. Withe, viða. Way, vegur. Wake, vaka. Weak, vika. Wooth, viður. Sword, sverð. Rule number 12. Words in English starting with SH, they used to be SK, and we'll find it in Icelandic as SK as well. For instance, shoot, skjóta. Shine, skina. Ship, skip. Shoe, skór. Shape, skapa. Shame, skam. Shawl, skall. Share, skera, meaning cutting in general. Shake, skakka. Dish, diskur. Fish, fiskur. Wish, óska. Rule number 13. Words in English starting with TH will find it as thought in Icelandic. This, þessi. Thank, þakka. That, það. Thick, þykkur. Thirsty, þyrstur. Thin, þunnur. Thing, meaning parliament or assembly. Rule number 14. Words in English having an intermediate NK will be found in Icelandic as double K. For instance, drink, drekka. Bank, bakki. Thank, þakka. Drunk, drukkin. Blink, blikka. Bench, bekkur. Sing, sökva. Stink, stökkva. With a different meaning. It means to jump. Also, CKs in English will be found in Icelandic as double Ks. For instance, sak, sökkur, pek, pakki, flak, flökkur, meaning a group in general. Rule number 15. Words in English having th or nd may be found in Icelandic as double n. For instance, tooth, tön, other, annar, mouth, munnur, find, finna, mind, minni, sooth, sannur. This is due to the Proto-Germanic n-th sound. As you can see here, sometimes English retains the n, sometimes it doesn't. And Icelandic transforms this consonant cluster into a double n. In some cases, the thorn reappeared, but mostly becomes double n. Rule number 16. Some of the last n's from English, they get nasalized and disappear completely in Icelandic. For instance, on, o, on, o, in, e, winter, vetur. Rule number 17. Words in English having a V or maybe a B or maybe a B at the end, they may be found in Icelandic as an F. For instance, silver, silver, grave, gröf, even, jafn, leaf, liva, give, geva, oven, öfn. The F is pronounced like a P in this case. Haven, höfn, name, nap, cleave, kljúfa, web, vefur. Rule number 18. A few words in English having O may be found in Icelandic as an A. For instance, wrong, rangur, fold, as in how many times, faldur, long, langur, cold, kaldur. Rule number 19. Words in English having double E may be found in Icelandic as I, like the verb to greet, græta. Now in Icelandic to say greeting, we say heilsa. Græta means something like crying. In Proto-West Germanic, grutjana meant something like shouting or screaming. And from shouting, you were calling someone's name, therefore you were greeting that person. But in Icelandic, if you were shouting, you were crying out loud, you were crying, therefore. So that's why it's a different meaning. Also, we got it back to English through the Norman language, which has also Nordic influence, as regret, which means that you are crying again for something. Sig, sækja, feed, fætur, green, græn, Swede, sætur. And finally, rule number 20. Words in English having an I, they used to be a long E sound in Proto-Germanic, and Icelandic retains that as an E. For instance, tide, teeth, here meaning time, as in Christmas tithe, not talking about the sea tide. Wine, vin, mine, min, 5, fem, alike, liquor, shine, skinna, ice, is, rice, hriskrjó. These words come from another language outside of Germanic languages. Time, timmi, and free, free. As an exception, free stays as free. Another extra pattern you could find is that some English words that have an EA, such as ear, hear, and leaf, may be found in Icelandic as eira, heira, and leifa. And if you know a little bit of German, words like gold, felsen, and wald, which means gold, rocks, or cliffs, and forest, may be found in Icelandic as kull, fjall, and völlur. But völlur does not mean forest, it means something like a field. And fjall does not mean cliff, it means mountains. So as you can see, there are also many similarities you can find with German, Dutch, and other Germanic languages, which is something very interesting to find out. There are still some words that I mentioned that they don't share exactly the same meaning anymore, but there's an explanation why, and that's the interesting part to find. If you would like to find more secrets about how to learn other languages or Icelandic, follow us. Thank you for watching, and share, subscribe, whatever. See you next time.